Understood that TRIP guides clients through three core processes.
Hmm.
Could you share with us a little bit more about each of those three processes?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. So the first process is called the projection process. The second process is called permission process. And then the third one is the compassion process. So these are three consecutive processes that a client is guided through over time. So it might be that the projection process might take 1, 2 sessions. And then as the client returns, they might go through the projection and the permission process. And then as we kind of work through that, that might take another 2 sessions or so. Sometimes it can all work in 1 session. And then we work towards processing the trauma in the compassion process. So there are three consecutive processes. And I want to delineate a little bit more about each of the processes, if that's okay. So that people get a bit of an understanding of what is it that you actually get to do in each of those processes, and also why. Why would we do that? Is that helpful if I do that?
Yes, please.
So, one of the interesting things is that we realize is that once a client has decided that, okay, with both eyes open, we would really like to process experiences that were difficult, that are still affecting us to this day, then the nervous system and the memory kind of know what the person is referencing. And what actually happens is that when we cover one eye tends to be connected to the past experiences. The other eye tends to be connected to the more present and coping experiences that we have. So, in the projection process, what actually tends to happen is that your nervous system, which actually is connected to the retina of your eye, now that it's actually linking to the experience that the client is mentioning, all of a sudden, the visual perspective of the person in front of the client can change. So this is quite startling for a lot of people because with both eyes open, they have no idea that both visually, emotionally, and perceptually, you actually have a different sense of the person in front of you. So what it actually tells us is that the nervous system has lost its ability to accurately discern the here and now once we cover one eye, because it's connected to the past on one side and then it's connected to the present on the other. And so in the projection process, what we do is we um, engage in assessing the nervous system. So in the projection process, we get to understand, okay, visually, how do I as a therapist now appear to you? Do I look the same? Or do I look distorted? And some of the distortions, we call them mild to wild distortions. They can be that all of a sudden the colors in my face have changed, or one half of my face is drooping and one half of my face looks normal. For some clients, I all of a sudden look like somebody completely different and they don't recognize me anymore. So you can imagine that just by selecting the the therapeutic topic that the client wants to work through, that just by covering one eye, their entire perception of the world and the person can instantly change. So what we do is we actually, as a therapist, we adjust our distance from the person or the location from side to side to actually understand where does the nervous system feel safer, calmer, and less threatened. So in the projection process, that's one key element that we do is we actually look at the nervous system, we engage, by covering one eye, and then we allow the client to report to us what is it that they experience. Do they see us the same? Then we actually ask, do they recognize us? Because if there are parts of that person that are connected to the past experience, well, as a therapist, you weren't part of that person's experience back then. So often, that person all of a sudden doesn't really recognize who you are because it's actually the past kind of gets brought to the front. And so that's kind of how the brain works. It kind of instantly accesses that experience. And then basically, the person might actually say to you, I am not sure who you are, or why are we even here? And so that's why we first and foremost really check from a nervous system perspective. Do you feel safe? Does the distance feel good? Do you recognize me? And then we check in, how is the body feeling? Because the body will indicate how the nervous system is responding. So in the projection process, we help the client to realize, okay, at this distance, my nervous system feels threatened. How do we know? Well, my chest might be tight. My muscles might actually be really intense. Or we might actually experience blurred vision. So in TRIP, in the projection process, clients often will experience blurred vision. And the way that that is interpreted in TRIP is that the blurred vision is basically your brain creating a fog so that the intensity of somebody being close is not experienced as intense. So basically, the blurred vision is a form of dissociation because the brain tries to distract and not be as present. So when we actually change our distance or the location side by side for the client, their blurred vision will all of a sudden clear up or clear up more so. Or they might actually recognize you better and kind of go, oh, now I recognize you. And so in the projection process, we make sure that those pieces are acknowledged and recognized. And we really want the client to understand that we validate and acknowledge and honor their boundaries, that their nervous system has every right to experience with, where do I feel safe? Where do I feel most comfortable? And weirdly enough, with both eyes open, people are not able to actually judge some of these things. So that's the first part in the projection process, is the nervous system piece. The second part is that attachment dynamics. And so a lot of our experiences in life, including, specific traumas, are still connected to how did people around us respond? Everything that we learn in life comes through relationships and comes through attachments. So when we actually engage in TRIP, when the client actually chooses their particular or their preferred topic that they would like to work through, now what often happens is that their perception of the therapist now actually is experienced as the attachment dynamics of the past. So, for example, if the person has experienced somebody to be very critical of them, the nervous system has learned to anticipate that everybody else is also going to be critical and wants to help protect you by anticipating somebody else is going to be critical. And so you better get ready for that. So, what actually happens in the projection process, we ask things like, okay, so am I allowed to know? Does this side actually have any worries or concerns about how I think or feel towards you? And so basically, what that does, it helps the person kind of go, yeah, you look like you're judging me. Or actually, I'm afraid you're going to hurt me. And even though that the therapist obviously hasn't been part of those past experiences, the nervous system has so been trained to anticipate the attachment responses from the past to show up in the present. And so basically, in the projection process, we get to understand how the client, with one eye open at a time, perceives the therapist from an attachment perspective. This is so incredibly important because it actually shows us what the brain is actually trying to protect itself with, or how it's actually trying to desperately connect. So there's two forms. It's either trying to protect or it's trying to connect. And we'll talk a little bit about that later. So in the projection process, we want to regulate the nervous system. We want to understand visually, physically, and emotionally. Can we first and foremost create a safer or safe base for the client? And second, can we understand to what extent the attachment dynamics of the past are actually interfering and being projected onto the therapist so that we actually become aware of the relationship dynamics right there? So that's basically what happens in the projection process.